Sure. So, hi everyone. Welcome. So glad to have you here. This session is about MBA careers, particularly the insights we're hearing directly through our relationships with admissions committees and career offices at top MBA programs. So Pamela and I are very passionate about this topic because it really is the foundation on which your MBA candidacies are built on. Additionally, by doing this work ahead of time and understanding what your career options are and could be, this will set you up for success in the internship and job search process as part of the MBA. So let's get to the agenda. Tonight, we're going to talk about the insights we've learned along with how you can infuse this learning into your MBA applications. So we're going to cover the following. First, we'll give you a little background on who we are. Then we'll provide insight on how we think about MBA admissions and your career paths. As mentioned, we'll discuss key trends in recruiting. This is not just what we think we're seeing. It is actually what we're hearing directly in our conversations with career offices. Then we'll talk about a few admissions myths and debunk them. And after that, we'll discuss the relationship between your career goals and how they're perceived by MBA admissions committees. And then last but not least, we will go into Q&A and answer some of your burning questions. So this session is meant to be interactive. Definitely use the chat. We are going to monitor this as we go along. So feel free to use it. And if we miss your question for whatever reason, that's why we have that time at the end. So thanks again for joining, especially given it's a Monday and a busy week. We're glad to have you here. So to start, let's tell you a little bit about ourselves. I'll start off on the introductions. My name is Laura Nelson. I have a BFA from Carnegie Mellon University, where I studied art, and I'm also a full-time MBA graduate of the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. I was a member of the AdCom there. Before business school, I worked in film and TV. I had a very nonlinear path going into business school and also coming out of the program. Following graduation, I entered the tech industry where I've worked for the past 15 years. I've held GM roles and was more recently a VP of marketing at a software startup. And my last two companies exited through acquisition. I've been an MBA admissions consultant, though, for 15 years with two of the top consulting firms and my own firm. Pamela and I launched MBA Pathfinders, founded on our distinct points of view and industry experience. So I'll let Pamela take the floor and provide her intro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pamela J. I have a BA in economics from Smith College. I also have a full-time MBA from Columbia Business School. A little bit of a non-traditional career as well. Prior to my MBA, I worked in advertising. I started in account management in the United States, and then I moved abroad and worked in global brand strategy for Nestle for 3 years. Post-MBA, I was originally going to go into marketing, and then I changed my mind and decided to go into consulting, which eventually led to internal strategy and internal operations, mostly for Fortune 500 companies. Similar to Laura, I had a bit of a crossover career. I started working as an MBA admissions consultant in 2010 and worked part-time for many years. I am also a member of AGAC. And I had my own, I worked for MBA Mission, and then I opened my own firm. And then I recently joined forces with Laura, as she mentioned, to co-found MBA Pathfinders. And finally, in addition to Paris, I worked there for 3 years. I also worked in Singapore for a year, and most of my industry experience has been on global teams. I've really enjoyed that. So that's me in a nutshell. Shall we start?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. So over the course of the last 15 years, collectively, Pamela and I have worked on almost every program imaginable, including full-time, part-time, online, executive, and dual degree applications at top programs like these, along with many others that are not on this slide. So a little context on our company, because I think this is important to set the stage for how we will talk about things moving forward. It's a little bit different than what you might be seeing in the marketplace of MBA admissions consultants. We have actual business expertise and more than 30 years of combined MBA admissions experience, and that doesn't count our team. But we also believe in direct and constructive feedback. And we don't use misleading marketing tactics to instill fear into candidates or to sell our services. Our goal is to set our clients up for success in the long haul. So let's talk about that long haul. What do we mean here? And this will lead to our career philosophy, right? A journey of 1,000 miles or more begins with a single step, or in this case, a decision to pursue an MBA. So which way are you going to go? Getting into and doing your MBA is just the beginning of this journey. Really, you have a long and meaningful journey and career ahead of you. So our company and philosophy is built around this idea. We want to help you get into that MBA program, but we also want to set you up for success on this curvy road that follows. So let's build on that idea, right? There are 3 steps to your ideal career. As I mentioned, step 1, that is getting into your target program. And lots of admissions consultants like us are hyper-focused on getting you into your target program. That's great if that's the end of this process, right? But we really believe that this is just the beginning, because step 2 is considering where you'll target for internships. Internship recruiting starts right when you land on campus, and you do need to hit the ground running. Because step 3, that's the full-time job you're pursuing post-MBA. So all of these steps are related and flow sequentially. You're pursuing this process now because you're already thinking about step 3. So we are focused on this long journey, not just step 1, and we really want to encourage you to think in the same way. Because as we've said, achieving your dream goals doesn't stop after gaining acceptance, right? Instead, you are really just getting started on that long career journey. So I know that is a lot about us, but I hope that really does help you, get in the mindset of what we are going to talk about tonight. So now that you've learned more about us and how we think about this process, we'd love to hear more about you. So in the chat, could you share what you want to do post MBA? I'll give you a minute to, find the chat. Please enter your feedback here. Love to see where you folks are headed on your journey through the MBA. Sometimes there's a delay in the chat.
So far, no one is going anywhere.
Quiet audience.
Very quiet audience. We're not going to hold you to it, I promise.
Yeah, don't worry. Awesome. So some answers are filing in: M&A advisory to PE pivot, supply chain consulting optimization. Excellent. I love the specificity of these so far.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, all good.
Consulting. Oh, environmental sustainability. That's really a hot topic now. That's awesome.
Absolutely. So we'll let those file in, and that will give us a little context on who's here. The reason why we are focused on this long haul, and this was definitely informed by our experiences at Ross and Columbia, and also consistent with what we see today at MBA programs, is that recruiting starts on day 1, right? There's not a ton of time to get acclimated, and while you'll be doing plenty of socializing with your peers in a new environment and enjoying orientation, recruiters will be on campus in the first couple weeks of school. So as a result, a strong understanding of your game plan is critical. You need to have that dialed in to the admissions process and be on that path when you arrive for day 1. And then finally, as part of the admissions and application process, you should be doing the work now, right? This is part of why and how you'll be making that 6-figure investment in business school. So with that in mind, let's dig deeper and talk about those recruiting trends. So as I mentioned, Pamela and I have relationships, not just with the admissions directors, but also their counterparts in the career offices too. And we talked to several of them across the top programs, and we wanted to roll up some of the trends that we're hearing and that we're seeing. So here's some of the big themes that we've come across of late. Starting with consulting, LDPs, and tech. It's probably no surprise to you that they overhired in 2022, and they've been course correcting since. No surprise there, right? But contrary to popular belief, consulting is not going away anytime soon. So I talked with a prospect a couple days ago, and she was concerned about her consulting goal. And by the way, she's already a consultant, but don't fear, if consulting is your goal, it's still happening. There's still a lot of hiring in consulting, and it is the top choice for grads in many of the top programs that many of you are probably evaluating. Next thing we want to talk about are, early indicators that we're hearing. These industries are beginning to recover. Companies are coming back to campus. We're in early November now, and the industries that have had a rough go of the past couple of years are coming back. And what's more, career directors are optimistic. So that's been really exciting to hear. They're often not a group that likes to, fluff up their prospects because, by the way, they need to report on their employment outcomes every year in the summer. And, these are factors that weigh into a program's rankings. So while it is unlikely that firms are going to hire at the unprecedented post-pandemic hiring levels, it's helpful to understand where we've been and where we're going. So again, these are macro trends, but we wanted to dive a little deeper and talk about what we're hearing and we're seeing across 4 core areas, discussing trends and insights. So I'm going to cover a couple, and then I'm going to hand over the mic to Pamela, who's going to take things from there. So first, let's talk about tech. And I'm covering tech because personally I have a career in tech, and I like to think I'm coming from an informed point of view. But the great news here is that, as we mentioned, early indicators, this is one of the industries that is coming back. So if you are recruiting for tech, this should be a positive sign. However, we'll caveat that by saying, there are layoffs, right? You've probably seen some of your peers or people in your network who might have had tech jobs who are still looking for jobs. There's a workforce out there that already has tech experience, and they're trying to land somewhere new. Some of them have MBAs, right? There's tens of thousands of people in this category. So if you are someone who's a career changer trying to get into tech, you'll have to differentiate yourself to compete with these experienced hires. So here are some of our insider tips for that. So number 1, product management. We get it. It's a popular career choice. And if you're really serious about tech, but don't have the experience in a tech or technical background, you need to look beyond product management. Which brings us to that second point, you got to broaden your reach. If product is your ultimate goal, you might want to consider product marketing and other areas to work your way into product management. Third point, firms are looking for people who can bridge tech and business. So if there are opportunities to build your tech skill set in school, I'm talking about technical courses like SQL, you will have an opportunity to stand out in that way. And the last one is key too. And this is just demonstrating your interest in the industry. And I know that it sounds very basic, but I can't tell you how many people I talk to who say that tech sounds good, it sounds exciting to them, but they don't really have a demonstrated interest or authentic interest in the industry. So be sure to join the tech club at your program and start digging into that interest if that's you. Ideally you have some of that in your history and in your candidacy up to this date, but if not, that is definitely a place to expand on that interest. So that's tech. I know that is quick and dirty. but I want to move on to marketing. And, here I'm going to kind of take out tech marketing, but I will touch on a couple points there. Here we want to talk about kind of the broad function of marketing. And that's one of our main points here, right? Marketing is a very broad field, and there is demand in numerous areas across marketing. So this does include tech, but MBAs can also find jobs across consumer goods, retail, etc. And if you think about it, most companies have a marketing department. As we discussed on the last slide, product marketing is a great entry into the tech industry and happens to be where I started my tech career. It's also an opportunity to get a ton of cross-functional collaboration and visibility. However, if you're interested in marketing and you're a little industry agnostic, there are larger tech organizations that are hiring. And if you're following a marketing career, you can go any number of directions. So our tips, because marketing is so broad, we recommend that you niche down. So marketing roles, they vary by industry and company, and not all of them hire MBAs. So you really need to develop an understanding of who is. Additionally, you have to consider your starting point, right? I mean, it is highly unlikely that you're just going to start a marketing strategy if you are new to the function. So what we recommend is picking a track and working your way up. If you've been studying marketing, or if you're just slightly familiar with it, you might be familiar with the term called T-based marketer. So numerous marketers come up and develop deep expertise in a few areas before they develop breadth across other areas and start leading departments. So the next one is important, and that is understanding the landscape of marketing-driven companies. Because the function is so broad and because the industry is so varied across companies, marketing jobs at marketing-driven companies are the ones that are more likely to lead to a leadership position in the C-suite, for example. You really need to hone in and understand which department holds the P&L at your target companies and what role marketing is going to play in driving revenue and collaborating with other departments. And then finally, large marketing-driven companies are training grounds for marketers. So think about those huge consumer goods companies like Unilever, P&G, et cetera. If you are broadly interested in marketing and looking for a solid foundation, these companies are still a tremendous way to gain expertise in the function. So tech and marketing, I'm going to hand things off to Pamela to discuss a couple other core areas.
And before we do, there's one question that came in the chat, Laura, which is whether marketing paths are open to international students.
So yeah, if there are marketing paths open to international students, I would say if you need a visa, it's typically going to be a company that has the resources to sponsor your visa. Of course, as I mentioned, you've got to target companies that are hiring MBAs that have the resources, the budget to sponsor you. So that's probably going to limit you to, certain tech organizations, certain CPG companies. We don't have a perfect crystal ball of what the economy is going to look like when, say, this group graduates in 2027, but those are pretty consistent sure bets for international candidates interested in marketing.
I can also add before I go into consulting from personal experience, we're not touching right now on leadership development programs, but marketing is a department that you might work in within a leadership development program. So my last corporate job was actually in marketing operations at MetLife. And there were a couple of international candidates who were part of the rotational program, and they did 2 years of marketing through that program. So there are definitely opportunities. Just thought I'd throw that in there.
All right, do you want to take over and talk about finance?
Yeah. So the third area we're going to touch on is finance. So what we heard from career directors is that many of them saw increased demand for investment banking roles in the past couple of years given that consulting and tech weren't hiring, probably more to replace consulting than tech. They're seeing a lot of demand for roles in venture capital, demand that they really don't think is realistic. And the last thing is that, we saw is a couple of people of the career director said, please keep in mind, VC and private equity are not interchangeable roles. And if you're a candidate, you should have a solid understanding of the difference. Now, I will say there's probably a little black and white. There are some companies that potentially do span the two. But, Graycroft and Blackstone are not the same companies. They're two different distinct career paths with very distinct skill sets required. So one of the things to think about is you really should think about, are you looking for a job in PE or are you looking for a job in VC? A lot of people come to me and, aren't quite sure. And we discuss what's better for them. VC came up as one of the hardest things to get into. And one of the concerns I'd say from career offices is making sure that candidates understand the background needed to break into VC. Now, similar to product management and needing a tech background to break into product management, you do actually need certain backgrounds pre-MBA to break into VC. And the most common are either prior experience in banking, PE, or consulting. Working for a startup, but not just working for the startup, experience writing a business plan or raising money for that startup. Probably won't come as a shock to anyone, but strong entrepreneurial experience, a deep understanding of the investment landscape, and extensive industry connections because you're helping companies get off the ground. Laura, can you?
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. Consulting. So as we just discussed before, the firms overhired in 2022 and they've been course correcting ever since. So what we're hearing is consulting is beginning to pick up again this year, but it's unlikely to ever return to the peak levels in the near future. That does not mean you should say, oh, I don't want to become a consultant. It just means, as we're going to get into in our insider tip, to think more broadly. So the first thing, that actually, to be fair, we tell our clients, but we're also hearing from these offices is look beyond MBB. If you have an exclusive focus or go into a career, business school saying, I only want to work in MBB. And I'm not just saying what you write on the application, but what you're thinking, you could end up with no consulting job because 50% of the class just can't get a job at MBB. So I hate the name tier 2, but unfortunately that's what it's referred to. And I worked for a tier 2 consulting firm, so I feel I can say that, but consider firms like EY, Accenture, Deloitte. There's so many firms out there that can get you on the path that you want to be at. Not everyone has to work at McKinsey. Lots of people get amazing careers from Deloitte. Think about boutique firms. There's so many interesting firms today that are doing a variety of different types of consulting. And then think of specialty firms. And specialty can take one of two areas. It could be an industry specialty. So for example, if you have an industry and an interest in healthcare, think about doing, healthcare consulting, because if you have experience in healthcare, it's going to be easier to get a job at a healthcare consulting firm, most likely, than at an MBB. But it could be something that's, maybe design thinking or just a completely different area. And the last is consider leadership development programs. At the end of the day, leadership development programs and consulting, I'd say for most people who don't want to become partners, are somewhat of a means to an end. And both of these are going to give you great training in strategy, in general management, granted in a slightly different way, but will probably allow you to reach the same long-term goal either way. Insider tip number 2, what are consultants looking for? Transferable skills. So, if you have experience in a client-facing role today, even if that has nothing to do with consulting, say a sales role, that's something that consulting firms really value. Analytics are really important to consulting firms. They want to be able to make sure that you can do all those fun Excel models. A previous career that required structured thinking. As all you consultants know, everything in consulting is about structured thinking. So being able to, even in an interview, express yourself in that structured manner is really important. And finally, strong industry experience can be a help. So for example, I actually have a current client who has a lot of experience in industry and energy, and she wants to go into consulting, and she's actually going to go in through the energy path because she's bringing that experience to the table and then learning the consulting skills in the short term. So with that, do you mind put something slides? So overall, we're hearing, the same insights across programs. First of all, be flexible. Develop a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. Most applications ask you what your short-term goal is and your long-term goal is, and they don't ask you for backup plans. The reality is, once you start, the career office is going to tell you to scrap whatever you wrote, and you must have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, at least your plan B, depends on the career office. Second, start the process early. Figure out what you want to do now and how to fill the gaps in your skill set. As Laura mentioned earlier, recruiting starts day one. You don't really have the time to get to school and figure out what it is you want to do. So if you want to go into tech, think about taking a course over the summer. If you want to get into PE, start your networking over the summer. Start thinking about what the gaps are in your skill set that you can do in the summer. And most of the top 15 career offices do start working with candidates the summer before they matriculate. So the resources are there if you want to take advantage of them. Networking is incredibly important. Consider, starting before school, especially if you're going into a more, informal, an area that requires extensive recruiting. That said, and this actually came from one very specific career director who shall remain nameless, but I thought it was a very interesting insight. Don't jump the gun. Networking is a very US thing. It's also something that in certain industries, we learn how to network, but in other industries, we don't. And you have one chance. And if you blow it, you might never get that job. So for example, if you're not comfortable networking and you want to be in banking, don't start networking. So this particular career director, top 10 school, suggested that you do a couple practice runs at companies you don't want to work at. Just get used to networking, but don't ruin your connections. Great. So next, we want to debunk a couple of popular admissions myths. First, MBA programs have quotas for specific career goals. They do not have programs for specific career goals. And one of the reasons is because they know half the career goals that they see aren't actually legitimate or true anyway. So they're not really looking to say, okay, well, 20% of our class wants to go into PE. We can only, get 10% in, so we're going to have to reject the other 10%. It doesn't work that way. They're just looking to see if it makes sense. And I have had clients say, I don't want to write that down because too many people are going to say that. Number two, MBA programs are looking for specific career goals. They're not. The world is your oyster. You can come up with anything you want to do as long as it's authentic, it makes sense, you have the ability, it makes sense, it's a logical pivot, and you need an MBA to get there. 3, MBA programs think you will pursue your long-term goal. I don't think anyone in my entire class at business school pursued whatever it is they think they wrote in their application. So why do they care? They care because it gives insight into how you're thinking about your career. Are you just putting a goal down, or have you thought through, at this point in time, this is where I see my career going? The reality is, and they know this, life gets in the way. We get into relationships, we learn new things at work, we have to move, there's issues that come up, there's so many different things that change lives. I certainly did not write that I want to be an admissions consultant in my career essay, but it gives them insight into how you're thinking about your career now, and that's going to continue to change throughout your entire life. And myth number 4, never tell an MBA program you want to work in PE. I can't tell you how many candidates I've had say, I want to work in PE, but I don't want to write that in my application because they don't want to hear it. That is not true. If it makes sense and you can get a job in PE, be authentic. The best applications are the most authentic. Would you mind going to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we focused on careers. Now we're going to focus on career goals and admissions. So how do they cross over? So one career services director said they actually, out of just pure interest, nothing else, did correlate applications and goals. And only 50% of applicants ended up pursuing the same goal from the one they stated in their application. Now, is that because they couldn't get the job? Is that because their, recession came into play? They wanted to do tech, all of a sudden tech wasn't available. They don't know that. But I think the important learning here is that admissions officers aren't taking the goal super seriously because they already know a lot of people aren't going to follow that goal. Another one is, I actually asked somebody, a career services director once, why do you ask what the person wants to do if you know they're probably not going to do it anyway? And the answer is that they know that many applicants end up changing goals. However, knowing how a candidate thinks about their goal helps them ensure that they will take full advantage of the program from day one, even if they later change their minds. So for example, if somebody thinks they want to go into consulting, they understand what it takes to go into consulting, they've done the work to understand what it means to go into consulting, they get there and they start working on an entrepreneurial project and they end up starting a business, that's absolutely fine. They knew what they were going in for. They weren't just going in to discover. And that's the important thing. Next slide. So why do they ask this question? So while they really know that there's a very decent chance candidates might change their mind, there are certain things that a goal will tell an admissions committee. First, it shows a strong sense of self-awareness. Does your goal make sense? Have you researched your goal? Do you even know what it is? Do you have the background to reach that goal? Second of all, have you engaged in career research prior to applying? Do you know if this is feasible or not feasible? They want to see people who have already done that work. And again, maybe they'll change their mind, but if they know they've done the work, they know they'll be able to do it in business school. Do you understand the nuances of different careers? I think marketing is one of the best ones to talk about because brand management is not the same as product management, which is not the same as marketing for a services firm. They want to know that you understand the difference. So if you think you want to be a marketer, you know what you're going to pursue and what those differences are. They want to know that you've at least reflected on your aspirations. It's okay to change your mind. You're going to be introduced to so many new things in business school, but you have some information now, and they want to make sure you're not just picking something, that you've really thought about what you might want to do, and that connects to your past and your future, which brings me to the next, that you've thought about your overall career plan. I usually tell candidates that their long-term, it's an equation. Your long-term goal equals your past experience plus your MBA plus your short-term goals. And it's your career path. Does it make sense? Based on what you've done, can you achieve your short-term goal with an MBA? And based on what you do, is your want to do long-term, is your short-term goal going to get you there? And finally, they want to know that you've thought through and developed a practical plan if your goals are aspirational. So if you have a goal and it sounds kind of like, maybe I can get there, maybe I can't, but you can show them why it makes sense, then they're going to buy into it. So it's all about, I'd say the first one, self-awareness.
I got a question by DM, if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah,
Pamela.
absolutely.
This person's asking, because you mentioned short-term goals a couple times in the last couple minutes, does it help to have a plan B in your short-term goal and potentially say this in the essays?
So I'd say it depends on two things. One, it depends on the essay. If you have 100 words to write your short-term goal and they don't ask for it, you're probably not going to have a huge opportunity. And second of all, I think it depends on the short-term goal itself. So I wouldn't write, I want to go into consulting and my plan B is going into marketing. But if you want to do something very specific, like work in a specialty consulting firm and there's, only 6 jobs available, then it might make sense to say, but I'm also open to working in a generalist consulting firm. So I'd say think about how real, usually I would say, I tell my clients, if you have a very, very specific goal that may be very difficult to get and there's just not that many jobs available, like you want to work in sports or something like that, then it is good to show them that you have a backup plan. But otherwise, I wouldn't do it. But do know it for the interview because they will ask you, some schools.
Absolutely.
So what should your goals be? They need to be realistic. They need to be achievable. One of the metrics in the rankings is what percent of the class has a job 3 months after graduation. The schools get measured on your ability to get a job. So they want to make sure that it doesn't matter what you want to do, but they want to make sure that you understand what a realistic and achievable goal is. And third is authentic. And this is really coming more from me than what I've heard. But the best applications and the best essays always come from a place in the heart. They're always the most authentic. When somebody says, I don't know what I want to do, I'm like, let's do some research, develop some hypotheses. What excites you the most? Because that's going to make the most realistic sounding essay.
I have heard many admissions directors push for authenticity as well. So I think you are on track with, the current trend of, what they would like to see here.
So what is realistic? Admissions committees want to see that, one, you truly understand what someone in your dream role does. And I know this sounds really obvious, but there are so many words out there that are thrown around: marketing, consulting, PE, VC. They want to make sure you actually know, if you were to start this job tomorrow, do you know what you would do? I usually tell my candidates, go into LinkedIn, read some job descriptions, see what the requirements are for that job. Make sure you know what that person's going to be doing, and then think about it as if you want that job. As much as an MBA is aspirational, it has to be reasonable as well. So make sure that your career pivot is a feasible career transition. Banking to consulting, completely reasonable. Similar skill sets, both require analytics, both require client services. Difficult, advertising to banking. And I will use myself in that because I was told very clearly when I was applying, don't ever think about going into banking. It's not going to happen. Not that I wanted to, but it's a much more difficult goal. Now, that doesn't mean you can't absolutely do it, but you don't want to tell the admissions committee that you want one of the most difficult goals out there. Third, you have a plan to get there. An MBA is not in and of itself the gateway to a new career. Going back to what Laura said at the beginning, it's just one element. And that's why career pathing is so expensive. Is so important, because getting the MBA is not the same as getting the career. It's just an element. And finally, make sure you actually need an MBA to achieve your goals, because there are some jobs out there that don't require an MBA. And if you can justify why you would do a better job with an MBA, that's great. But you need to show that you understand it's not currently a requirement, and you think it would be an improvement to that, and that you could do a better job by gaining certain skills. Can you change slides, please? So career goals should be authentic, not to be redundant. The better you understand your career path, the more authentic it will seem. People write from the heart. And again, as we said earlier, getting into a program is just the beginning of the journey. Achieving your goals means preparing before you start school. Ask yourself, what's the point of gaining acceptance to your dream program if I don't land my dream job? And that's why we're so focused on career pathing, because it's great. I get so excited when my candidates get into the school they want, but you're there to get a job at the end of the day. So
Mhm.
part of that is actually thinking about how to get the job you want, not just get into school. Next slide. Um, one of the things is, again, we're hearing from career officers is adaptability is important. Demonstrate that you have an awareness of hiring trends and the flexibility to adapt to changing market conditions. It's not so much about saying you have a plan A and a plan B. It's showing throughout the way you present yourself that you're somebody who can move with the flow or go with the flow.
Mhm.
Consider a fallback option if your dream career does not immediately materialize post-MBA. And this is especially important in today's market because, quite frankly, we don't know what the economy is going to look like in 3 years. I'm assuming most of you are applying now or the following year. So that means you're going to be looking for jobs in spring of 2027 or spring of 2028. And no one knows what's going to be important then. No one knows what the economy is going to look like, and nobody knows what industries are going to be trending. So be adaptable, be flexible.
Mhm.
So, what admissions committees expect from you? Provide evidence that supports those goals and interests. It's very difficult to switch careers if you can't explain why. We already talked about some of this. But you can articulate this through your interests, passions, professional, volunteer, and extracurricular projects. Sometimes I see somebody say, I'm really interested in fashion, or I'm really interested in the environment, or I'm really interested in sports, but they haven't done anything that shows that. You don't have to have a job that demonstrates your next job, but if your future is based on a passion industry, you need to be able to show evidence of that passion. So for example, if you're interested in sustainable food, you don't have to have worked in sustainable food, but you should have volunteered with an organization that did something with sustainable food, or you should have done something on the side, because otherwise it's not really believable. Why do you want to do this career if you haven't done anything with it in the first place? Um, you want to show your strengths, your capabilities, your experience, networking, outreach. The less traditional your career, the more you probably want to reach out to people and make sure that you really can demonstrate you understand it, and a clear understanding of how point A leads to point B. Um, and that's it. So time for questions. I see one that came up in the chat.
Yeah, we'll pause here. And of course, we're happy to talk through your goals and what you're thinking in terms of your intentions for your career in the short and the long term. And we do have a promo available through November 15th. So if you're interested in availing yourself of our services, either hourly or packages, you will get that rate through November 15th. And obviously use the QR codes to land on our profile pages. But I know we're close on time, but we will hang around for a few more moments. If you have any questions on the admissions process, on some of the career content we talked about, on anything that comes to mind as it relates to the MBA, we're here to help answer those. So let us know, and obviously feel free to use the chat. Pamela, do you want to take this one on the deferred applicants? What do you think about this? Does any of our
Yeah, sure.
change when it comes to deferred applicants?
Yes, it does, because you haven't had a job yet, so you have a lot more opportunity to change things. So a lot of the advice around career switchers is going to change. That said, all of the advice around really understanding a career path, understanding what things are, understanding what you need to do, demonstrating self-awareness, research, all of that's the same. Really understanding how, a job you haven't had yet may or may not lead to another job is not as important. And
Right.
some schools like Harvard, for example, I think they were one of the first the 2+2 is one of the first programs. The reason they even started the deferred program was to give people an opportunity to try something new and then feel like they could get a job in banking or consulting. And that's literally why they came up with the program initially. So it's okay.
Yeah, in either scenario for full-time or deferred programs, the admissions committee is really banking on your potential as a leader and, business professional. Obviously, with the full-time program, you're gonna come in with an average of 5, 6 years experience, but most of your career is still ahead of you. And obviously, the same is true and more with deferred candidates. So they really are banking on the future with this process. And of course, offering this opportunity to lock down talent for themselves too, for future classes. Yeah, any other questions come to mind?
You're welcome.
Well, hopefully this was helpful. Thank you all for coming. I know Monday is not the easiest day, but obviously, use the QR codes. We're so thankful for your interaction and hopefully this was useful. And yeah, any parting words, Pamela?
No, just feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, and best of luck to everyone and have a great week.
Good luck. Have a great week. Bye, guys.